Well, hello plant lovers, it is Matthew in Melbourne welcoming you to my channel. Thanks for finding me here in the very crowded world of orchid YouTube videos. Now here on my channel, I try to grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne, Australia without any help from greenhouses or grow lights or equipment. Really just me and them struggling along, mostly outside these days with a few things inside. So if that sounds like your conditions, do hit subscribe. I post every week on a Friday, very amateur ramblings, plant lovers, but sometimes there are successes and they might help you in your orchid journey. And our orchid journey is ting-tinging and stopping at this fabulous bus stop. Look at that glorious flower. I am very happy to reveal that this is Guarechea. There's the front, and Black Comet is the cultivar name. And there it is. It has rebloomed for me, which is thrilling because I bought this plant in December of last year, which is about 10 months ago. And in fact, I took some footage when I bought it because I bought two. So first of all, let's just go and look at that footage from about 10 months ago. Well, plant lovers, here are my two Guarechea Black Comets. There we have one, there we have two. And because they were half price, I bought two for the price of one, which means I can experiment with having one outside and one inside. Now, the ancestry of these things is quite mixed, but essentially Cattleya conditions or care is the way to go. However, there is Cattleya care and there is Cattleya care. Now, I have many Cattleyas growing out here where they get bright, indirect sun and do take my winter and nighttime minimums, but they're undercover, as you can see, so they don't get wet and cold. However, some Cattleyas are, of course, more tropical, more warm growing, and they need to be inside. Where do these sit on the spectrum? Well, we can experiment because I've got two for the price of one. So one is going to have to sacrifice itself possibly for the good of humanity, while the other one will definitely get a warm winter. So let's see what happens. So you see, the grand plan was to have two and experiment and see which one did best. But you know what, plant lovers? Since then, I have moved. And I have also realized that I have too many orchids. And so the notion of having two identical plants, unfortunately, was just no longer valid. So alas, the other one has gone, but this one has remained because it has the most beautiful flower spike, which is now opened. And look at those flowers. Very happy with that. Now, firstly, can you see the sheath still remaining here? People often write me comments and complain and say, why don't you take off the sheath of your orchids? Well, here we are. I'm just removing it for you now. Because often scale insects and mealybugs and other such beasts do love those protected conditions. So yeah, you should remove those papery sheaths from your orchids. So here we are. This is Guarechea, which is a hybrid. We'll get to it in a minute, but I just want to show you because I'm thrilled that it has bloomed for me. And now we can do a legitimate care video because I've had success. So firstly, I think it does have a fragrance. It looks very Encyclia-like, as you can see, but there's all manner of taxonomic changes that have occurred in the past couple of decades with this orchid and its ancestors. So let me tell you what it is. Firstly, it's a hybrid between two species, ultimately, of orchids, which are Prosthecia cochleata, which was known for a long time as Encyclia cochleata, but the name changed, I think, in the 90s. I can't quite remember, but anyway. But you still see Prosthecia cochleata named as Encyclia because I think people are very familiar with the name Encyclia anyway. It has a new name now, but that's one of the species ancestors. But the other is Guaranthe boehringiana, which is also known as Cattleya boehringiana for a long time, since the 19th century, in fact, when it was named. Interestingly, boehringiana, named after John Boehring, who was a great naturalist and plant collector, and his father also was too, and his father actually set up the Hong Kong Botanic Garden. So quite a line of interest in botany and plants. So it's named after him, but it is now no longer a Cattleya, it is now Guaranthe. And those two met in heaven to create this wonderful hybrid group. And Black Comet is a cultivar that I think originated relatively recently in I think 2020. And so as per that video, I bought two plants because they were both on sale for half price because the flower spike had died. And Yeah, why buy one when you can have two? But I have changed my ways now, plant lovers. So I cannot tell you whether the experiment worked because the Prosthecia ancestor of this plant can certainly take cool temperatures, and it comes from variable altitudes, but it can grow at quite high altitudes, which means it can take cooler temperatures. Now, both of those species are Central American. Prosthecia has a much broader habitat, and the Guarechea has a much narrower habitat in very Central America, but the same sort of geographic part of the world. Heavenly. But yes, one is a warmer grower than the other. So I was unsure as to whether it could take cool temperatures. Well, we will now never know, except that when I did get rid of the other one, it was still fine and healthy. So it probably would have flowered perhaps just a little later than the one that was inside. So as you can see, I guess a little like Cattleya growths, you've got this new growth here, which has matured, and then a two-leaf pseudobulb, and the new spike has emerged from the apex of that bulb in between the two leaves. So there you go. And it had flowered before. So this is the flower spike remnants in there. That was the flower spike when I bought it. And that was the first year it had flowered. And it's interesting because you can see the pseudobulbs and you can see the progression right down there at the bottom, and I'll come in and show you more closely, is the original seedling. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth year, the fifth growth point, it flowered, which, 4 to 5 years. And then we've got the 6th year, this growth, which is bigger and better and more juicy than the others, has produced a flower spike with more flowers, I think, than last year. Now, I can see that this is going to be quite a chunky plant as it gets bigger. So I imagine we'll get stronger pseudobulbs with a inflorescence that will have more flowers on it as time goes by. So it's taken a year of growth, basically. The spike was initiated in midwinter. It's now early spring, and it's opened for me, and it's long lasting too. These flowers have been open for quite a while, probably about a month. The flower spike took a while to emerge, but long lasting flowers. And yes, like encyclias, as we were calling them, fragrant. And I was trying to decide what this smells like. And I do think a bit of honeysuckle, a bit of honey, a little touch of jonquil, but a bit more sort of oriental and rich, if that makes any sense. But it's a lovely fragrance, but the color, obviously it's called Black Comet because people think that it's so very dark. And the lip certainly has a much darker burgundy touch, but it's a beautiful flower. And care-wise, so this is the plant that I was keeping indoors, and I was keeping one outdoors to see which progressed well. As I said, it did survive and was happy, but I had to get rid of it because I don't have enough space really for multiples of the same thing. So we're focusing on the one inside, which I think spiked sooner than the other one. And basically you can see the plant has very sort of Cattleya-like growth, and the Guarechea ancestor of this certainly can take full sun. It grows, it's sort of semi-lithophytic and is often on quite exposed cliffs. So a lot of light is required. The other one, moderate so. So a good guess is sort of bright indirect light. And that was certainly what this one was getting that initiated the spike. I then moved, and I will say it's in perhaps a less bright indirect spot than it was, but the flower has still opened. Often moving an orchid when the spike is just sort of emerging and growing is a really bad move because that changing condition can really alter or stymie the development of the flower. But this one sailed through it, and look at that. Now I'm really thrilled because it is the first of its type. I had an encyclia cochleata or Prosthecia cochleata, which just really struggled and never really did much. So in my ruthlessness of moving, I ditched it because it just wasn't performing, and I'd had it for years. And that's the new me, plant lovers. I just don't have the space or the time or the inclination for anything that isn't going to do well. So back to our conditions. Bright indirect light, and moisture-wise, obviously I really dialed it down in terms of watering in winter, but I certainly still watered it. But I did allow it to dry out reasonably, and it is the sort, look at the size of those pseudobulbs, it can take drying out reasonably well between each watering. So not something you need to keep super moist. When this flower spike dies, there'll be a period of intermediate period before you'll get a little bump at the bottom where your new growth will emerge. So in that period between death of flower new spike emerging, you might just relax a little bit on your watering, but not let it dry out for huge amounts of time. But I would allow it to dry out a little bit more. Then you can see perhaps here all that rigorous root growth initiated by the new growth. So that same thing is going to happen here. So you'll get new root nibs and they'll want to go into new media, and it's then that you want to start really watering and feeding as that new growth emerges. And I would also probably say that once the flower dies and as that new growth starts emerging is the time to repot it, which for me is probably going to be late spring, because you can see by the habit of this, it's going to be a little rhizomy creepy baby, I feel, so it's going to need a bit of space. So we'll cross that bridge though, I think, perhaps when this new growth emerges. And as you can also see, I haven't repotted it since I bought it 10 months ago, because it was in bloom when I bought it, and there you go, it just missed the boat. So this spring will be the time, well, later in the season, when I do repot it. And repotting it, what you can see there is that it's in just a plain medium bark mix, which is perfect for that Cattleya type of orchid. They've got quite chunky roots, which want to get down into the medium. Depends where you are though and how you grow Cattleya type of orchids. You could mix some sphagnum in there, you could mix some perlite, you can grow it in whatever way really that you have success with Cattleya types of orchids, because it has a similar growth pattern, I think similar needs. So that's what I would do. However you're succeeding, replicate. For me, Cattleyas do really well in medium-ish to largish size bark and just about nothing else. Sometimes I might put in a bit of charcoal just to liven it up. And then food-wise, pretty much follow the instructions, but I guess respond to what the plant wants. So it's putting on its growth. Once the flowers died, you'll see the growth coming out. You'll see the new roots initiated. Once those roots are into the medium, that's when you're going to want to start feeding it. So a good thing to do is a bit of slow release fertilizer in spring on the top, a few pellets of that. Allow that, and that gets released over time. And then throughout the warmer parts of the year, while it is in active growth, liquid fertilizer and or liquid tonic. And I would do that, I don't know, maybe once or so-ish a week at the peak of the growing season, and dilute that down to 1/8 or 1/10 of the recommended dose, so you're not doing it too much, because that can spell disaster. But yes, plenty of nutrient while the plant is growing. And so temperature wise, yeah, my other plant did survive outside in Melbourne quite well, so our temperatures don't freeze in winter, but we get pretty close, 5 degrees centigrade, so high 30s, low 40s Fahrenheit, no frost, no freezing, but chilly. And it was fine. But yeah, I just had to make a decision about which one to keep, and I kept this one because it was in bloom earlier. So as an indoor plant, obviously no issues. It is a hybrid and both species come from a variety of climatic conditions. So it's one of those things that can happily sail through, I think, a couple of conditions, but is ideally suited to indoor growing. Just like with anything, really, you need to make sure it's getting enough light, the right light, because that is always the thing that will determine whether or not your plant is going to flower or not. So there we are, plant lovers. Guarechea Black Comet. There we go. I'm very happy that this one has flowered for me, that it loves life indoors. Very happy I bought it half price because the flower was dying. And I'm sorry I had to get rid of your sibling, but there was just no room at the inn anymore for multiples. Fragrance is lovely. And a really easy orchid. So I'm looking forward to this bulking up and producing more spikes for me. Look at that, isn't it gorgeous? And I'm also looking forward to seeing what we're doing next week, plant lovers. I do post a video every week on a Friday, so if you want to know what our rambling might be, you'll have to hit subscribe and the alert button if you want to know when my missive pings into the ether. And I look forward to seeing you with a new orchidy story next week. So wherever you are, I hope all's well. See you then.